It was an ordinary evening, and I was sitting in my home office, preparing for my daily live stream. My content mainly involved sharing bits of daily life, answering fans' questions, and occasionally playing games. Streaming had become a part of my routine, almost every night, making me feel relaxed, and interacting with my fans enriched my life. That night, the weather was a bit stuffy. I turned on the air conditioner and prepared a chilled drink. Everything seemed so pleasant. As usual, I turned on my computer, adjusted the camera and microphone, and started the live stream. As viewers gradually entered the stream, greetings and various questions popped up on the screen, and I responded to each, creating a light and joyful atmosphere. Halfway through the stream, a strange account suddenly entered my room. The username was unremarkable, but his comments made me uneasy. He sent a message in the chat, "I know where you live." My heart skipped a beat, but to avoid disrupting the stream, I didn't show any reaction and continued interacting with other viewers. However, this stranger did not stop. He continued sending messages, "You're in your study right now, aren't you? And the air conditioner is on." My heart raced and my fingers trembled a bit. Indeed, I was in my study, and the air conditioner was on. Such accurate descriptions made me start to wonder if he really knew where I lived. I tried to convince myself it was just a prank, a coincidence, but the unease in my heart grew stronger. I decided to ignore him and continue the stream, but my attention was already scattered. A few minutes later, the account sent another message, "You don't believe me? I'll prove it to you." Then he typed something that made my blood run cold. "I'm right next door." Seeing this message, it felt as if my blood had frozen, my whole body stiffened. The atmosphere in the live stream turned eerie as viewers reacted with astonishment and questions. I tried to stay calm and continued chatting with the audience, but my mind was in turmoil. At that moment, I heard 3 clear knocks on the wall. Each knock felt like it was striking my heart, making me jump. I looked towards the source of the sound, the wall separating my study from the next room. The knocks were so real that I could hardly believe it was just a coincidence. My heart pounded even harder, and my breathing quickened. My mind raced, trying to come up with a solution. Despite the continuous stream of messages from viewers, I could no longer focus. Forcing a smile, I told my audience, "Sorry, that's it for today. I'm a bit tired." Then I quickly ended the stream. The moment I turned off the computer, I almost jumped out of my chair, rushed to the door and locked it. Then I went to the window and closed the curtains, trying to create a relatively safe environment. I sat in the corner of my study, hugging my knees, trying to calm down, but the 3 knocks kept echoing in my ears, impossible to shake off. I started recalling the past few days of streaming, trying to figure out who might know my address, but I came up empty. For safety's sake, I decided not to go outside or stream for the time being. I feared the stranger was really next door, perhaps watching me through some means. That night, I barely slept, my ears keenly picking up every tiny sound. Time seemed to pass exceptionally slowly, each second feeling like an hour. I kept my eyes fixed on the door, terrified someone might suddenly break in. Eventually dawn broke, and I felt a slight sense of relief. Early the next morning, I decided to move out immediately. The house no longer felt safe, and I had to leave. Hastily, I packed my essentials and called a moving company, arranging for the quickest service available. Within a few hours, I had loaded everything into the truck and left the place I had lived in for years with a heavy heart. The new place was smaller than the previous one, but I didn't mind. Security was more important than anything else. After moving in, I immediately changed all the locks and installed surveillance cameras, paying extra attention to privacy protection measures. To prevent similar incidents, I decided never to disclose any personal information related to my life, especially details about my address, family, or friends, during my stream. Although the incident had passed, it left a deep psychological scar. Whenever night fell, I couldn't help but recall those 3 knocks in that terrifying account. I often checked if the doors and windows were locked and if the cameras were working properly. The anxiety from that period made me more cautious and a bit paranoid. After a difficult breakup, I decided to move out of the apartment I shared with my ex-boyfriend and start a new life. Due to rent issues, I chose to live with a stranger. Through a well-known housing agency, I found a decent bedroom apartment and arranged to meet my future roommate. It was a sunny weekend when I, with a mix of excitement and nervousness, arrived at the apartment. My roommate, Lisa, had arrived earlier. She seemed to be a gentle and friendly girl. We had a brief chat, and she told me she was a nurse with a busy schedule, often working night shifts, so we might not see each other much. This reassured me, as I also needed my own space. On moving day, Lisa was very helpful, assisting me in moving my things and familiarizing me with the neighborhood. She knew every detail, from the nearest supermarket to the best bus routes. Initially, I found Lisa to be a good roommate, even though she occasionally asked personal questions about my life, which I considered normal social behavior. However, as time went on, certain details started to unsettle me. Firstly, Lisa seemed overly interested in my habits. Once, while I was cooking dinner in the kitchen, she suddenly asked why I always used a specific brand of pasta. I just laughed it off at the time, but her excessive attention to my routines made me uneasy. What disturbed me more was that she seemed to know my comings and goings. One time, I unexpectedly decided to work late at the office and returned home around 9 o'clock to find Lisa sitting in the living room, smiling and saying, "Why are you so late today?" This concern, which should have been comforting, instead sent chills down my spine. Lisa's behavior grew increasingly strange. One day while I was working in my bedroom, I heard footsteps outside the door. Assuming it was Lisa, I opened the door to find no one there. Over the next few days, I frequently heard similar footsteps, but every time I checked, I found nothing. Things reached a climax on a Friday night. After work, I went to a newly opened cafe and had a pleasant evening with friends. It was nearly midnight when I returned home. Trying not to wake Lisa, I quietly made my way to my room, but as I approached my bedroom door, I heard low murmurs coming from inside. I held my breath and listened carefully. It was Lisa's voice, seemingly talking to someone. I knocked on the door and the whispering stopped abruptly, leaving the room in dead silence. A few seconds later she opened the door, beaming at me, "You're back. Did you have fun?" Despite her natural demeanor, I felt something was off. Over the following days, I paid extra attention to her actions, trying to find clues. One day, out of curiosity, I peeked through the crack of her door when she was out and noticed some unfamiliar papers. Driven by curiosity, I sneaked into her room when she wasn't home. On her desk, I found something that sent shivers down my spine. There was a detailed diary of my daily schedule, noting precisely when I left and returned home, and even the places I visited. More horrifically, I found photos I didn't remember being taken. These pictures were clearly taken without my Nolgenbile, were of me at the cafe near my office, and even at the supermarket. Seeing this, my mind went blank, and cold sweat soaked my back. I realized immediately that Lisa wasn't just overly curious about my life. She had been stalking me. In a panic, I packed my belongings, deciding to leave this dangerous place at once. As I was leaving the room, I heard footsteps outside the door. Lisa was back. I quickly hid in the closet, holding my breath, my heart pounding wildly. She moved around the room for a while, then stopped in front of the closet. I could almost hear her breathing. My palms were sweating. After a few seconds she seemed to abandon whatever thought she had, turned, and left the room. I heard her busying herself in the kitchen. Seizing this opportunity, I quietly slipped out of the room, rushed outside, and took a cab to a friend's house. That night, I stayed at my friend's place, my nerves frayed. The next day, I contacted the housing agency, explained the situation, and urgently requested a move. While waiting for the arrangements, I stayed with my friend, too scared to return to the apartment. Eventually, with the agency's help, I found a new place and resolved never to room with a stranger again. This harrowing experience taught me about the complexity and danger of human nature. Though I wasn't physically harmed, the fear of being stalked left a deep scar on my psyche. In the final semester of my senior year, my life fell into unprecedented chaos. During this time, I was working tirelessly on my thesis, feeling an immense amount of pressure. The submission deadline was looming, and one morning, I discovered that the thesis I had spent months painstakingly writing had mysteriously vanished. I was living near a university in California, sharing an apartment with a classmate. We had known each other for a while and generally got along well. He was a quiet, introverted person who didn't talk much, but was always willing to help others, giving off an air of reliability. However, I never would have guessed that he would do something so unimaginable to me. It happened on an ordinary night. Like usual, I was up late revising my thesis. Around 2 in the morning, I couldn't keep my eyes open any longer and decided to rest for a bit. Before going to bed, I made sure to save the latest version of my thesis and backed it up in multiple places, just to be safe. Then I turned off my computer and went to sleep. The next morning, when I turned on my computer again, I was shocked to see a blank document on the screen. No matter where I look, it worth on the hard doctor and the various cloud accounts where I'd backed up the documentation showed file not found or deleted. I was instantly gripped by panic and began to wonder if I had somehow deleted the files in my sleep. However, that seemed highly unlikely. In my panic, I decided to seek help from my roommate. After all, he was the only person who could have accessed my computer while I was asleep. When I asked him if he had seen my computer or touched my files, he responded with an unnerving calmness, even a bit of disdain. He told me he had been asleep all night and hadn't touched anything. His attitude only made me more suspicious. Although we usually got along well, he had been acting strangely distant recently, sometimes giving me odd looks. I started to notice little things like how he would stay up late into the night on his computer, often mumbling to himself. One night, I decided to get to the bottom of it. I pretended to go to bed early, then quietly watched him from the crack in my door. Sure enough, around midnight, he started working on his computer again. I tiptoed closer and, through his slightly ajar door, saw his screen filled with strange codes and data I couldn't understand. This made me increasingly uneasy. The next day, I found an excuse to ask a friend from the computer science department to help me see if the deleted files could be recovered. After checking, my friend told me that the files had been deliberately and thoroughly erased, with no chance of recovery. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, I decided to confront my roommate once more, giving him a chance to come clean. I explained how crucial the thesis was for my graduation, and hoped he would be honest. He remained silent for a long time before finally breaking into a cold laugh and saying, "You have no idea what kind of person is living right next to you." His words hit me like a sledgehammer. I suddenly recalled a drunken conversation months ago where he mentioned his life plan. At the time, I dismissed it as drunken ramblings, but now, looking back, it all seemed to point to a larger scheme, with my missing thesis being just one part of it. Realizing I had to act, I quietly contacted the university's cybercustodial department, sharing my suspicions and evidence. They promised to investigate and advised me not to alert my roommate. A few days later, the investigation results came in. The cybercustodial team found deletion records of my thesis on my roommate's computer, and they discovered that his account had attempted to access the university's internal systems multiple times. These behaviors were clearly abnormal. Even more shocking, they found that he had been conducting illegal transactions on the dark web, using his access to the university to obtain sensitive data.